Picture this. The South China Sea shimmered under the midday sun, cameras flashing, reporters buzzing, and Chinese officials proudly watching as their newest pride and joy, the Fujin, China's most advanced aircraft carrier, showed off its strength. Fighter jets roared off its deck, catapults launched test flights with precision, and the message seemed clear. China was stepping confidently onto the world's naval stage. But far from the crowd, in the quiet waters of Subic Bay in the Philippines, something stirred beneath the surface. A dark shadow slowly rose through the depths until a massive steel giant broke through the waves, the USS Ohio. To anyone watching, it wasn't just another submarine surfacing, it was a silent declaration. A reminder that while aircraft carriers might dominate the spotlight, the real power often hides where no one can see, under the ocean. The timing couldn't have been more deliberate. As Beijing flaunted its latest hardware, the US quietly countered with one of its deadliest and most mysterious machines. The Ohio isn't just another submarine, it's a legend of the deep. Originally born during the Cold War in 1981, it was once a nuclear ballistic missile sub, the kind built to end wars before they even began. But 2 decades later, between 2002 and 2006, the Navy gave it a complete makeover. The Ohio was reborn, not as a weapon of deterrence, but as a strike and stealth platform capable of hitting hard and vanishing without a trace. Gone were its 24 Trident nuclear missile tubes. In their place, launchers that could fire up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles, each one able to travel nearly 1,000 miles and strike its target with pinpoint precision. To put that in perspective, that's more firepower than what most entire navies can bring to a fight. Bunkers, command centers, radar stations, all could be wiped out before an enemy even knew where the attack came from. And that's just the beginning. 2 of those massive missile tubes now serve a very different purpose, as secret gateways for Navy SEALs and other special forces. The Ohio can quietly deploy up to 66 operatives, along with their gear, deep in hostile territory. It's not just a war machine, it's a ghost ship that can strike, spy, and disappear, all in one mission. Powered by a nuclear reactor, the submarine can stay hidden underwater for months, its only real limit being food and the crew's endurance. With around 155 sailors on board, it's a floating fortress that can stay unseen for as long as it wants. So when it decides to surface, everyone pays attention, because that appearance is never by accident. When the Ohio rose to the surface in the Philippines, right as China paraded the Fujin, it wasn't a coincidence. It was a message, calm, quiet, but unmistakable. While China may rule the surface, America still commands the depths. For years, China's earlier carriers, the Liaoning and the Shandong, had relied on old-school ski jump ramps to send planes into the sky. But the Fujin? It broke from tradition. This time, China turned to cutting-edge tech. The Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System, or EMALS. Instead of using steam pressure, it uses powerful magnetic fields to fling jets into the air. Think of it like a giant invisible slingshot made of electricity. The system's electric coils build up magnetic force layer by layer, each pulse pulling stronger than the last until the aircraft rockets forward, smooth, fast, and precise. This isn't just about flashy engineering. EMALS allows the Fujin to launch heavier jets packed with more fuel, more weapons, and more range. That means China's aircraft can fly farther, strike harder, and stay in the fight longer. In naval warfare, that's the difference between watching from afar and controlling the skies. In September, as cameras rolled and drones captured every moment, the Fujin proved it could deliver. A sleek J-35 stealth fighter thundered down the deck, boosted by EMALS invisible power. Moments later, the KJ-600, an early warning aircraft similar to America's E-2 Hawkeye, followed, lifting into the air with ease. The message from Beijing's state media was loud and proud. China had finally caught up. For the Chinese Navy, this was more than just a test flight. It was validation, proof that decades of research, investment, and ambition were paying off. The Fujin wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of how far China had come in challenging U.S. dominance at sea. For the first time, the naval gap between Beijing and Washington seemed to be narrowing, even if just slightly. And the timing? It couldn't have been more strategic. Russia, China's closest ally, was still bogged down in its war with Ukraine, a conflict dragging into its 4th year with no clear end in sight. Meanwhile, the United States was flexing its own muscles, unveiling stealth bombers, strengthening alliances, and playing a key role in supporting Israel in the Middle East. America's influence was shining bright across multiple fronts. Beijing, on the other hand, was starting to feel sidelined. Powerful, yes, but mostly through trade and economics. Nearly two-thirds of its imports and exports depend on sea routes through the South China Sea and the narrow Malacca Strait, waters that are also patrolled and protected by U.S. and allied forces. That's why showcasing the Fujin wasn't just about military might, it was a message to the world, and especially to Washington. China is no longer just a trading power, it's a military one too. The USS Ohio showing up in Philippine waters wasn't a coincidence. It was a carefully planned masterstroke by the U.S. Navy. Subic Bay, sitting on the island of Luzon, is only about 500 miles away from where China's Fujin was carrying out its headline-grabbing operations. For a vessel like the Ohio, that distance is nothing, practically next door. It's entirely possible the submarine had been quietly observing the Fujin's activities for weeks, unseen and unheard, before surfacing at the exact moment when it would send the strongest signal possible. With a top speed of around 20 to 25 knots, the Ohio could cover those 500 miles in a single day if it needed to. But its true power lies in its stealth. The submarine's sensors and surveillance systems can monitor vast stretches of ocean without ever revealing its position. So when it finally appeared above water, it didn't just show up, it made a point. The message was sharp and unsettling for Beijing. First, it proved that American submarines could operate undetected in areas China likes to think of as its own backyard. Despite China's growing investment in anti-submarine technology, advanced sonar networks, maritime patrol planes, and even experimental AI tracking systems, none of it seemed to matter. The Ohio had slipped in, done its job, and surfaced on its own terms. Second, it underlined a truth every Navy understands but few like to admit. Aircraft carriers may look powerful, but they're also enormous, slow-moving targets. The Ohio, armed with up to 154 Tomahawk missiles, could, in theory, wipe out the Fujin and its entire escort fleet long before Chinese radar even caught a hint of movement. And with modern missile technology capable of overwhelming even the most sophisticated defenses, the idea wasn't far-fetched. Submarines like the Ohio are the unseen first strike weapons of the sea, silent until it's far too late to react. Third, the Ohio's presence in Subic Bay did more than showcase power. It strengthened alliances. The Philippines, under increasing pressure from Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, has still chosen to side with the United States. Thanks to the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, U.S. forces now have access to several bases across the Philippine archipelago, a strategic web that effectively surrounds much of China's claimed waters in the South China Sea. It's a setup that gives Washington both reach and reassurance, and one that no doubt frustrates Beijing's plans for regional dominance. Interestingly, this move also followed the Philippines' decision to step away from China's Belt and Road Initiative 2 years earlier, citing shifting geopolitics and growing unease about Beijing's ambitions. That withdrawal, while subtle at the time, may have been one of the sparks behind China's more aggressive behavior in the region, including its recent military displays. And while the Ohio stole the spotlight this time, it's far from the only U.S. submarine patrolling the Indo-Pacific. In 2024, reports surfaced about the USS Minnesota, a Virginia-class attack submarine, operating in the same general area. Unlike the Ohio, which is a converted missile platform, the Minnesota is purpose-built for stealth and speed. It's the naval equivalent of a sniper, designed to strike silently and vanish without a trace. What makes this even more intriguing is that the Minnesota was last officially recorded near Australia in early 2025. Since then, its location has been a mystery. It could have moved north, closer to the South China Sea, or it could be lurking somewhere nearby, watching. The fact that the U.S. chose to let the older, less stealthy Ohio make a public appearance while keeping its newer submarines hidden only reinforced the larger point. If China couldn't even detect the Ohio, what else might be moving unseen beneath its waters? The truth is, when it comes to undersea warfare, the U.S. still has a commanding edge. With 53 attack submarines and 14 ballistic missile subs quietly prowling the oceans, America's reach below the waves remains unmatched. And that's what keeps its rivals awake at night. The Ohio-class submarines aren't just relics of the Cold War. They've evolved into silent predators that shape the balance of power beneath the world's oceans. Alongside the USS Ohio, 4 other submarines in its class have been refitted into guided missile platforms, each capable of slipping through international waters almost undetected. These massive vessels can gather intelligence, launch covert missions, and strike hundreds of targets all at once. a level of capability that no visible fleet of surface ships can match. For China, this presents a nightmare scenario. Its grand strategy depends on pushing its navy farther from its shores, sending carriers, destroyers, and support ships across the Indo-Pacific to project dominance. But every ship that leaves port becomes a potential target. A single U.S. submarine operating unseen can track, stalk, and eliminate those vessels before they ever realize they're being hunted. And China, for all its advances in anti-submarine technology, still can't guarantee it would detect an American sub before it's too late. The USS Ohio's brief appearance wasn't just about flexing muscle, it revealed a deeper truth about how both nations approach power. China invests in what can be seen: gleaming aircraft carriers, new stealth fighters, and enormous amphibious assault ships that make perfect headlines and patriotic showcases. The United States, on the other hand, invests in what can't be seen: stealth, reach, and resilience. Submarines that vanish into the depths, missiles that strike from over 1,000 miles away, networks of bases, satellites, and surveillance systems that quietly knit together an invisible wall of defense across the Pacific. And this difference in strategy is what makes the U.S. so hard to counter. While China parades its carriers, the U.S. maintains what it calls persistent presence. Its submarines are scattered across the Pacific, operating silently, their locations unknown even to allies. Their very absence is their power. Enemies are forced to assume that an American sub might be watching, ready to strike at any time. This constant uncertainty forces China to stay on alert 24/7. The Fujian's carrier group, for instance, has to run continuous anti-submarine patrols, deploying helicopters, destroyers, and sonar-equipped escorts just to maintain a defensive bubble. That drains resources, stretches manpower, and undermines the image of the Fujian as an unstoppable force. Then there's the Ohio's strike capability. With 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles locked and ready, it can threaten key Chinese military sites from deep beneath the sea. Airfields, missile bases, radar stations, and command centers, all within range the moment an Ohio-class submarine enters the region. That alone flips China's area denial strategy upside down. The whole idea of using long-range missiles to keep U.S. carriers away becomes meaningless when the real threat comes from below, unseen and already in position. And even with all its recent progress, China's technology still trails behind. The Fujian may boast its new electromagnetic launch system, but it's still a first-generation design. The U.S. Navy's Gerald R. Ford-class carriers, which use the same technology, are years ahead in reliability, power management, and integration. The Chinese J-35 stealth fighter, though promising, is still experimental and reportedly faces issues with engines and flight stability. The KJ-600 early warning aircraft has only been spotted in scattered test flights, showing how new and unrefined China's carrier aviation still is.
If you've made it this far into the video, it means you're enjoying what we do here at Euro Bulletin. Take a second to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more updates and insights from Europe and its partners. Let's dive in more into the subject.
Maz. By contrast, U.S. carrier operations have been fine-tuned through decades of combat and constant innovation. From Vietnam to the Persian Gulf to the Pacific, American naval aviation isn't just a show of strength. It's a system perfected through experience. And for all of China's progress, it's still racing to catch up to a moving target that's been mastering this game for generations. American carrier strike groups are more than just floating airfields. They're command centers built to coordinate entire fleets across continents. These groups have patrolled international waters for decades, showing up in nearly every major conflict of the last 30 years. In the Middle East alone, U.S. carriers have acted as mobile bases, launching airstrikes, delivering supplies, and ensuring that vital sea routes, especially those near the Persian Gulf, stayed out of enemy hands. They're not just weapons, they're movable pieces of territory, projecting American influence wherever they go. And yet, among all of America's naval assets, the USS Ohio still represents something China hasn't quite figured out how to match. Beijing often releases footage of its own nuclear submarines, especially the 094 and 094A Jin-class models, boasting that they can carry both conventional and nuclear missiles with faster speeds than the American Ohio. But speed isn't what wins under the ocean. Silence does. And China's subs haven't been tested far from home waters, leaving open questions about how stealthy they truly are, and whether they could evade the U.S. Navy's highly advanced underwater surveillance systems. Then, there's another problem. Most of China's submarines still rely on diesel-electric power. These boats are cheaper to build but far noisier and need to surface more often to refuel and restock, making them easier to track. The Ohio, on the other hand, runs on nuclear power, meaning it can stay submerged for months, silent and unseen. Even though it's an older model, its upgrades make it an entirely different beast, one that China likely hasn't figured out how to handle. But the Ohio's sudden appearance wasn't just a message to Beijing. It sent ripples straight across the Taiwan Strait. The small island of Taiwan remains the flashpoint at the center of the US-China rivalry, a place where global trade, security, and technology collide. Beijing has made no secret of its intentions to reunify Taiwan with the mainland, even hinting that it's willing to use force if diplomacy fails. The Fujian's carrier operations, those highly publicized flight tests, may well be part of a rehearsal for such a scenario. If China ever attempted a blockade or full-scale invasion of Taiwan, its aircraft carriers would be tasked with providing air cover and protecting amphibious assault forces. But that's exactly where America's undersea power would come into play. A handful of U.S. submarines, Ohio-class guided missile subs and Virginia-class attack subs, could cripple a Chinese invasion fleet before it ever reached the beaches. Each submarine carries enough Tomahawk missiles to wipe out entire groups of ships while staying completely undetected. A coordinated strike like that could shatter an amphibious assault in hours, not days. Taiwan, for its part, has been strengthening its coastal defenses, embracing what military strategists call the porcupine strategy, making itself so difficult and costly to attack that any invasion would be too painful to continue. New anti-ship missiles, coastal artillery, and rapid response systems make its shores a formidable obstacle. Add to that U.S. support and the silent deterrent of submarines lurking offshore, and any Chinese operation suddenly becomes a massive gamble. Yet the stakes run deeper than territory or pride. Taiwan sits at the heart of the global tech supply chain. It's home to the world's most advanced semiconductor manufacturing, the microchips that power everything from smartphones to fighter jets. Beijing's attempts to gain access to Taiwan's cutting-edge chip technology have repeatedly been blocked, forcing China to rely on imports from the very island it refuses to recognize as independent. Ironically, even as political tensions rise, Taiwan's chips continue to fuel much of China's economy, a reminder that in this standoff, every move carries global consequences. By 2022, China made up more than 40% of Taiwan's exports, mostly high-value electronics and semiconductor components. But by 2025, that balance had begun to shift, with the United States emerging as one of Taiwan's biggest trade partners. Still, geography doesn't change, and China continues to benefit from its closeness to the island's booming microchip industry. The same chips that power the world's smartphones, cars, and satellites often begin just a few hundred miles off China's coast, in factories that Beijing can see but not control. That tension, economic dependence mixed with political rivalry, lies at the heart of the power struggle playing out across the Indo-Pacific. Both China and the U.S. are locked in a constant race to outmaneuver the other, whether through trade, technology, or sheer military presence. And beneath all the displays of surface strength, there's one arena where the U.S. advantage remains solid: the silent world of submarines. The United States continues to lead the depths. Its Navy is building new Virginia-class attack submarines at an impressive rate of just over one per year, each one quieter, smarter, and deadlier than the last. These submarines come equipped with the latest stealth systems, upgraded sensors, and long-range precision weapons. Meanwhile, the next generation of nuclear deterrent, the Columbia-class submarines, is being designed to replace the aging Ohio fleet, ensuring America's undersea power remains unmatched for decades to come. For now, the USS Ohio and its 3 refitted sister ships remain crucial players. They might be older, but their ability to carry more than 150 Tomahawk missiles and deploy elite special forces keeps them at the center of America's global strategy. These submarines are the unseen anchors of U.S. dominance in the Pacific, proof that what's hidden beneath the surface often matters more than what's visible above it. China, on the other hand, is still racing to catch up. It's pouring resources into new submarine programs, but building the boats is only the first step. True mastery requires a strong industrial foundation, well-trained crews, sophisticated maintenance systems, and years of operational experience. All things the U.S. Navy has been perfecting for generations. Geography adds another challenge for Beijing. To reach the open Pacific, China's Navy must navigate narrow choke points like the Miyako Strait, the Bashi Channel, and the Malacca Strait. Each of these areas can be closely monitored, or even blocked, by US and allied forces. That means, even before China's submarines can venture into deep waters, they're already being watched. To truly become a global naval power, China needs to operate freely across the world's oceans. But to do that safely, it must first master the art of detecting what it cannot see: US submarines. And despite bold claims from Beijing, there's little evidence it's anywhere close to achieving that level of capability. The quiet face-off in September 2025, when the USS Ohio surfaced near the Philippines just as the Fujin showcased its flight trials, captured the entire picture in a single moment. China is building faster, flashier ships and making real progress in naval technology, but the US still dominates the spaces that truly decide wars: the deep sea, long-range precision strikes, and global reach without detection. China's carriers might steal the spotlight, gleaming under television lights and national flags, but it's the submarines, the ones no one ever sees, that shape the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific. And the Ohio's sudden appearance was a reminder that the United States hasn't just been watching from afar,